What happens when you enter a race you know you can't win? When you play a game that you know 100% you're going to get beaten at? You say, screw it, throw caution to the wind. Have a go from 50 yards out, run it from behind your own posts, go blasting out of the blocks, not really caring when the lactic acid is going to kick in. Hop back to the late 1980s and that's exactly the position that Peugeot was in at Le Mans. They knew there was no chance of beating the big boys, so they decided to build the craziest car to achieve one single crazy goal. It's one of the all-time great motorsport Hail Marys, sending a car to the moon knowing it was going to blow up at any moment. This is the story of the fastest Peugeot ever, the car that broke Le Mans forever. In the 1980s, endurance racing was nuts. The Group C regulations that were brought in for 1982 essentially set a fuel consumption rating and then left the engineers to it. That meant crazy downforce, every engine layout under the sun, screaming NA engines, brutal twin-turbo engines, as well as some of the coolest liveries ever. Rothmans, Silk Cut, Martini, Brune, Leighton House, that whole era from 1982 to 1993 was epic. Peugeot came good at the end of that era with the cutting-edge, screaming V10 905. The wings they had on that thing were incredible. But in the 80s, they were really just making up the numbers behind the Jags, Porsches and Sauber Mercedes. That's because it wasn't a full factory team. It was basically a couple of guys from the Peugeot design team working in their spare time. Their cars sported heavily modified Peugeot engines, but the fundamental chassis couldn't keep up with the crazy aerodynamic, even carbon-tubbed cars from the bigger teams. The band of after-hours brothers kept wheeling out racing cars to compete at Le Mans during the 80s, but they then realised without full factory backing, they were never going to achieve a win. So they shifted their efforts to another, simpler goal, but also quite a sketchy goal. But they got their heads down. That goal was to make a Peugeot-powered racing car the fastest car ever at Le Mans. Not lap time, just sheer top speed. And to achieve that, they would need to break the 400km/h barrier. That's 248 miles an hour. So was born the WM P88, which stands for Walter Moynier, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, the surnames of the two designers fronting the whole thing, Peugeot and 1988. Taking a look at the three prototypes that they created, you can see quite a nice evolution. The 86 car is quite straight at the front, almost Ferrari road car-esque from that era. It's got side exit exhausts and the rear wing is quite straight too. The 87 car is quite a jump. It suddenly looks much more aerodynamic. A lot of the edges have been rounded off, especially the rear wing end plates, and the wheels seem to have decreased in size and gone right inboard of the body of the car. A weird thing about the 87 car, it seems to have a cooler poking right out the front of it. The 88 car then seemed just a slight tweak of the 87, the main differences being the front was much more scooped and that cooler seems to have disappeared somewhere. But in terms of bodywork, it seemed very, very similar. The engine though was a different kettle of fish. That Peugeot 3-litre twin-turbo V6 started life in the front of a Peugeot 505, creating 130 horsepower, but they cranked it up past nigh on Veyron numbers. 910 horsepower from a Peugeot engine. That is just begging for cooling issues, transmissions getting completely munched, and cylinder heads blowing clear of the block. But 910 horsepower was the number that they thought they needed to achieve their goal. There's a fuel consumption regulation in there, but they didn't care about it because they were simply going for top speed, not the win. So it didn't matter. So did they do it? Well, in qualifying, the P88 went through the speed trap at 387km/h. A P87 and the P88 started the race, but of course they suffered from the get-go with serious engine and gearbox issues, with the P87 having to retire after just 13 laps with an obliterated gearbox. The P88 was sat in the pits for over 3.5 hours with engine and bodywork issues before it was forced out back onto track simply to crank up the turbo boost and see what it could do. And it did it! The French car went on to record numerous laps where it achieved over 400km/h. The official record was 405km/h down the Mulsanne straight. That's 252 miles an hour. There are rumours though that the car actually accomplished 407, 253, but Peugeot wanted the number to be doctored to 405 to help the launch of the new Peugeot 405 road car. 407, no use to anyone. So the P88 turned up and accomplished its goal, and then completely shat itself with all of the issues that you'd expect from winding a Peugeot engine past 900 horsepower. But it didn't matter. The Hail Mary had been thrown and it had landed. They did it! Now for the real impact this car made on history. The ACO, the body behind Le Mans, were so pissed off that the car had gone that quickly and done so in such an irresponsible way, considering they were never planning on finishing the race, that they decided to make one of the most definitive changes to one of the most famous racetracks in the world. The thing is, the Mulsanne straight used to actually be a proper straight, 4.2 miles of flat-out, pedal-to-the-floor racing with a slight kink in it that meant speeds well over 200 miles an hour were the norm. But the ACO decided over 250 was too dangerous and decided to put not one, but two chicanes in to split up the straight. Although the top speed run was a bit of fun, it essentially knackered one of the all-time great sections of racetrack. God damn it, Peugeot. The current speed record for this new layout was set just a couple of years later in 1990 by the savage 1100 brake horsepower Nissan R90 CK. That thing accomplished 236 miles an hour between the chicanes. Imagine what that thing would have done if the Mulsanne straight was actually a straight and Peugeot hadn't mucked it up for everyone back in '88. As I said earlier, Peugeot returned to Le Mans with a proper factory effort. Peugeot Talbot Sport won in 1992 and 93 using the V10 905. They would then return to the top spot in 2009 thanks to the Peugeot 908, that diesel LMP1 car. They are now competing at Le Mans with this crazy looking thing. If you follow modern endurance racing, you'll know exactly what this thing is. If you don't, it's the Peugeot 9X8, and because Peugeot don't do anything in a normal way, it's the only top-level racing car that doesn't have a rear wing. You may have noticed the change in location. Welcome to the brand new DRIVETRIBE office. We've just moved in, so it's not completely finished. We need to fill it up with a whole load of cool YouTube stuff. But the first furniture we've bagged for the office are these Valencia home theatre seats. Soft Napa leather, French diamond stitching. I can write my video scripts in this position, have a post-lunch nap in this position, charge my phone using these ports. We'll eventually have maybe another sofa here, coffee table there, and you will see it on our second channel, More DRIVETRIBE, where we will post a full office tour once this place is fully finished. A big thank you to Valencia for sending us out these seats. If you want one, click the link in the description below. Back to swallows. How does this work then? Well, the plan was to create a car that had such a trick underfloor that it would create so much downforce that you don't need a rear wing. If you think back to that crazy F1 era of ground effects, some of those cars had such amazing underfloors to suck the car to the ground that they didn't even put front wings on them. That means the 9X8 will be super slippery down the straights at Le Mans because it's not got big aerodynamic aids that are causing drag. Super slippery and downforce. It seems like a massive win. The main issue? A rear wing acts the same at any ride height, meaning bumps in the tarmac and curbs don't really mess with it, keeping downforce nice and consistent. Relying on the floor means that the car becomes very ride height sensitive. If you are at a bumpy circuit that needs ride height to be raised to stop the car bottoming out, you lose a huge chunk of your downforce, meaning you are seconds a lap slower than the more traditional winged cars. In 2024, they qualified 15th, over a second off pole, and their best car finished 11th, 2 laps off the winner's Ferrari. We all want manufacturers taking risks like this to pull it off and shake things up. Maybe they can keep pushing with this concept and create something genuinely competitive in the future. What we can be sure of is there will never be a faster Peugeot than the P88. In fact, it may take Bugatti to go racing at Le Mans with the Bolide for anyone to achieve over 250 miles an hour down the Mulsanne straight ever again. Andy Wallace, time to get the old race suit back on. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. I've been Mike, and don't forget to subscribe to DriveTribe.